Good morning everybody, welcome back after half term. Today I'm going to show you how to do some clouds and some sun rays coming through them. One of my students asked if I could show you how to do that, so I thought I'd start this week after half term with these two studies. Another question she asked was also how to paint mist. So I'll do a second tutorial showing you how to do that as well. Hope you're all well. I know they've raised, or loosened, should I say, the restrictions today. But please just carry on staying safe and hopefully we'll all come out of this the other side. How you can take part is obviously by watching the tutorials. Ask questions, leave comments, like, subscribe, join the Facebook, etc, etc. It helps me to understand what it is you would like to learn about, and obviously this idea has come from one of my students, so it's a much better way of working if the ideas come from you. So please don't be scared to leave comments or ask questions, and also watch my live chats on Thursday mornings at 11 o'clock. Okay, so to start with today, I've got two ideas for cloud studies, and I've just masked out with some masking fluid. And if you're not sure what that is, this is the masking fluid. Terry Harrison's masking fluid. It's called the blue stuff. And it's tinted with blue so that you can see it on the paper. A lot of masking fluid is not tinted and it's quite difficult to see, but as you can see this on here. So these are just to mask out the very bright whites in the clouds, so that it accentuates the sun's rays when we put them in. Okay, I've got several round brushes here. This is for laying down the water, etc, etc, and then doing fine detail. And then I've got my palette of colours. I've also got a hairdryer to hand, 2 pots of paint and a couple of sheets of loo roll or kitchen roll. Have a quick slurp of coffee. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is this one. And we're going to mix up some cerulean blue, I think. Cerulean or cobalt will do. You need to have it quite, in order for the rays to stand out, you need to have the blue quite strong. So mix up a big puddle of it in your palette before you start with the wet in wet. Okay, so mix it up quite strong. If you make it really pale, your rays won't stand out. You'll still be able to see them, but they won't stand out as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put down a layer of water using a big brush. And it's been, as you all know, it's been extremely warm over the last few days. We've had temperatures of 23, 24, 25 degrees. So I've been constantly watering the garden and working outside as well, painting outside because my studio is just like a greenhouse. Okay, so there's the water. You can tell by just lifting up your paper and sort of moving it around if you've missed any bits. Take the paint and we're just going to do this wet in wet, so you can see that the paint spreads really easily, and also because it's wet in wet, it'll create a much softer result than putting it down wet on, what they call wet on dry. So that's wet paper, wet paint on dry paper. You tend not to get so many hard edges, and the paint just sort of does its own thing really. depending on where the water is. Okay, so nice and dark on your paper, and we're not worried too much about any marks because the paint will eventually settle into its own pattern on the paper. So I'm going to put in a much thicker area of this blue here, just to give it a little bit more depth in places like that. So if I had not stuck my paper down, I could pick this up now and move it around a bit, and it would blend a little bit more, but that is good enough for me. Now you can either leave this to dry or you can work on it wet. You get different results with each method. So when you dry it, you would dry it off maybe with a hairdryer or leave it to dry. It's up to you. You get obviously a little bit more control with the mark making. So if you've got very straight rays coming out of the back of a cloud or whatever you're painting rays coming out of, then sometimes it's a good idea just to leave it to dry. But I just wanted to show you, what I'll do is I'll probably show you both. So this is the method that you use if you're doing it in the wet way. So while it's still wet, you're going to run your brush up and down like this. Now you need to clean your brush off, clean it off with each stroke, and then dab it off on a piece of paper towel. So I'm just going to move my water over there so I can actually work. So like I said, now you must do this reasonably quickly. So each time, wet, dip it back in the pot, dry it off on a paper towel like this, and then give it a stroke. Now ideally you would just lift off one stroke at a time, because otherwise you irritate your paper. Okay, so ideally don't go over and over and over, because the more you do that, the more likely you're going to get bits. Can you see how that bit has come up there? That is your paper. So if you haven't got very good quality paper, then that's what will happen. So one stroke is enough. So can you see that now? One stroke, wet your brush off, dry it off on a paper towel like that, and just keep going until you've got the rays that you want. So you can see it's quite effective, but you've just got to follow those rules. So don't go over your marks, and be as gentle as possible. So again, over this side, wet it off in your water, clean it off, dry it off, and then lift. Clean it off, dry it off, lift, and so on and so forth until you're happy with the effect that you've got, like so. I'm just going to put one more just in the middle here, like that. So if you're working, it's always best to work from the cloud outwards, and the reason being is that you can start off quite light so that the mark is fairly narrow at the base, and then as you go away you can press, and that will widen your mark like that. Can you see? Okay, so that will give the feeling of perspective as you're coming out of, as the ray is coming out of the cloud. So like I said, just start with your brush fairly upright and then press, and you can see now that this is now drying out a touch. So once it gets to that stage, you are going to struggle with lifting off. Okay, so this is a really good time to do it when it's wet, what they call wet in wet. All right, so once you've done that, you can start to add your clouds in, but I'm not going to do it just yet because I'm not sure whether this edging round here is dry yet. So if you do have a hairdryer to hand, then just dry it off very, very loosely. Okay, that should be enough. And we're just going to put some slurp of a coffee again, some loose clouds in. And for this, I'm going to use my my number 8 round brush, and I'm just going to mix. I'm going to actually mix a little bit of grey. So, but I'm going to put some red into it. So I've got some Paynes grey. I'm going to make it a little bit sort of purpley in tone. So I'm just going to pop in a little bit of alizarin crimson into the mix. So grey, Paynes grey if you've got it. If you haven't got it, black. But mix your black with a touch of blue so it's not so black, because black tends to be very flat. And we're just going to put that over the majority of the cloud. So in here, like that, like that. And I'm going to do a similar job to lifting off with the rays that I just showed you there. So that we can thin this down a touch, because we're going to have thick cloud and thin cloud in this area. So I've left a little white mark just coming down there, down here. I'm just going to fill that in. So if you've got any areas that you want to be lighter, then just lift as we did before. So clean your brush off, wipe it off and lift to soften certain areas. Now you can do this with a smaller brush if you want to be a little bit more detailed, but I'm just going to do it with this brush. So like I said, just lift. And that'll just give you a few areas of brightness that will give you a little bit of structure in your clouds to add to what eventually you're going to put in a minute. So just lift off a few shapes here and there like this. Keep wiping and cleaning with your paper towel like so. Okay, that's enough for me. So now we're just going to go in with a darker mix. So same mix again, a little bit of Paynes grey and a little bit of alizarin crimson, and we're just going to build up a second layer. So I'm just going to put in a few bits in here. Now just remember that Paynes grey does dry lighter than when you put it down. A lot of watercolours do that. So if you want drama in your clouds, make sure that you put enough colour in. So again, just draw it down as far as you want it to go, like this. And then if you've got any hard edges, I've got a hair there, that appear that you don't like, you may like some hard edges like the one that's being created here at the moment. Leave them alone. If you don't like them, then you can do something about them by just lifting off the edges. So again, it's that lifting technique. A piece of paper towel, just moisten your brush a little, not too wet, and just go in at the top end of those marks if you don't like them, and just put a little bit of water in. So the tip with this is not to use too much water, so just wipe your brush off a little bit. So here, like I said, if it's a little bit harsh, just go in and take off a little bit of that edge with a what they call a semi-dry brush. Just going to try and soften a few of those edges in like that. Okay, so for even more drama, we're going to take almost straight Paynes grey now, and we're just going to put a really dark, intense colour down here, like this, and that will give you the drama in the sky that you're after. Maybe bring up a touch. Nice to leave gaps in the clouds if you can, just to give it that feeling of transparency. We're going to have a bit of darkness over here, I think. A little bit of darkness coming in that side. Okay, so again, if your edges are hard, just a semi-dry, clean brush and just go in and soften those edges if you don't like them, like that. I quite like the odd hard edge, so I'm going to leave some of them there as they are. Okay, so I think I'll leave that as it is, because what I'm going to do in about 10 minutes when I finish this one is I'm going to come back and I'm going to lift off the masking fluid from this area. Okay, so the second one over here, I'm going to use some clean water. So the second one is slightly different in that we can put the water all over it to start with. So we're going to do wet in wet again, all over the paper, and this time we're going to take some orange. Yeah, I'm going to use the mop brush for this, and I'm just going to put a bit of orange in around here, and I'm just going to let it spread just around that area there, right? And if you want, you can put a touch of yellow in there as well. So I'm just drying off my mop brush a bit. I'm going to take a bit of yellow and I'm just going to put a little touch of yellow in here, just underneath that cloud, and a little bit up here like that. Okay, and that'll do for that section. Okay, so the next bit is to mix up that same mix of Paynes grey that I used in the cloud here, which is Paynes grey mixed with alizarin crimson. And we're putting the alizarin crimson in just to make it a little purple in tone. And because there's blue in Paynes grey, it'll go purple. So again, we're just going to put this, I'm going to just put it here and here, because up the top we're going to, you'll see why in a minute, we're going to put in some dark clouds, so we don't necessarily need to put it everywhere. Break that bottom area up around here with a few dots of the colour, because you don't want the sort of circular form being created in that area. So now I'm just going to put a little bit of Paynes grey in this area here, just to give it a little bit more drama, and it's going to lighten off as it comes over this side. Like so. I'm going to put a little bit more in, because again, like I said, with Paynes grey, it does tend to lighten off a bit when it dries. So in order to get this drama that we're after, I'm just going to add a touch more in. Wash my brush off, dry it off. I'm just going to try and get rid of that bit there. Okay, so there you are. So again, if you have a hairdryer to hand, please just dry off that section quickly. Just dry it off a little bit this time, and I'm going to use that round brush again, and I'm going to lift off a large ray coming down from this area here downwards. So again, start where the cloud is, wipe it off, dry it off, start where the cloud is, wipe it off, dry it off. Now you can see that because I've dried it off a touch, I'm getting a break in the ray, and that's kind of nice. Okay, so wipe it off, dry it off, and this is where the Paynes grey has dried on the paper underneath. So keep going until you're happy with your mark that you're making, going backwards and forwards into that cloud, like I said, into that cloud, and making the bottom of the ray much wider than the top. Okay, so that's the first one. I'm just going to quickly dry this off. Okay, so we've got one before, and we're going to do some after addition of the cloud this time. So we're going to add the cloud in now. We're going to use the same colours, so a bit of Paynes grey. Let me move that over there. A bit of alizarin crimson. You can use a bit of purple if you prefer a purpley tone, a more sort of purpley tone, should I say. So up here we've got a cloud coming down like this. So this is now wet, what they call wet on dry. Okay, so we've got a cloud coming down and into this area here. So I'm more or less skirting the area that I put the masking fluid on. So into that there. So fairly light with this colour here for the moment, and then leave it for a bit. And we're just going to put in an undercoat on the other cloud, which comes in quite across here like this. Try and leave your marks really broken in this area if you can, like so. And it's going to come round. We're going to leave a little bit of that lovely colour showing through there, and then we're going to come up here like that, into that, again skirting this area here where we've got some masking fluid, and down and up. Broken lines if you can. Broken lines will give you a far more natural looking cloud. So up here like that. So maybe and into that area there. We're going to darken this section up in a minute. I'm just going to soften this a touch, just soften it in a little bit, just so it's not so harsh up that top corner there. Okay, now we're going to darken it up. We're just going to put some more Paynes grey in, and it's going to go in this top corner in the main Paynes grey, and just let it spread into that paint that you've just put down. I'm nearly dipping this into my coffee here. I have to be careful. Very often drinking coffee with a little hint of watercolour in it. And again into this area here, just really give it some depth with this dark Paynes grey colour. Again, if it looks like it's a bit harsh, just pop some water down, not too much, and just soften it into the clouds that you've got underneath. Okay, and if the area is too dark, then do the opposite. So over here into this area here, we're going to put in some darker tone like this. We're just going to bring that down into this cloud here. Just a touch, not too much on this side. We want most of the drama to come from this dark patch over here. Okay, so maybe a little bit more down here. Just a touch. Maybe go into... I'm just going to take some slightly lighter colour and just dot it over this ray here, which is the bit of masking fluid that I've got still in that. Just a little touch over the ray. Okay, just a little, take that up there a bit as well. Okay, so the other thing is just to put in, we're just going to put some really loose clouds coming in from this side, again just to give a feeling of perspective. Start on the right with your paint so that as you move over, the paint runs off your brush and will become slightly lighter. So get rid of most of your paint on this side here like that, and then just draw it very carefully. If it's too dark still, just wipe a little bit off into your water or onto a paper towel. We're just going to flick some little clouds across that area there. Same up here. Can you see how it's slightly lighter now because I just wiped a touch off in my water? Just slightly lighter. Slightly wispy clouds coming in, like, just make your marks with the tip of your brush. Like that. It's very effective. Okay. Soften that section up there a little because I don't really like that shape. It's really important that you go back and you just sort of tweak the odd shape that you've got in your clouds, especially if you've got clumsy marks like this one here. Just again, bit of water or a cleanish brush and just sort of soften the edges up like that. Okay, all right, so now we're going to dry this off. Taking quite a long time to dry that off, so I'm just going to just lift a little bit of colour off there like that. Just lift a bit off. Now you can see I just used the edge of my paper. I'm just pressing it down into that area where it was a bit heavy. Okay, so while this is completely drying, I'm going to just remove the masking fluid off of this one. Now the masking fluid will come off really easily. Just gently use circular motions with your finger and just go in and lift those little marks of masking fluid off, and you can see that that just gives you a little bit of lightness on the edges of those clouds. Just roughly. There might be some more under here. I don't know where I put it. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to see, but there you go. All right, so it's just giving you a couple of highlights around the edges to play with. Now you can add more colour to that if you want to. If for example you wanted a little bit of a more darkness here or whatever, then you know, go ahead. Same with your clouds, but that's the main theory, is with wet on wet, just lift off the rays before you put your clouds in. And with this one, I've lifted this one up behind the cloud to give you a little bit more of 3D feeling. And now what we're going to do, now this is more or less dry, I'm just going to lift off a couple more rays coming over the top of these clouds. So again, you want a clean, dry, semi-dry brush. Okay, and you're going to work from the cloud down. So I'm going to put some rays coming from up here. So I'm going to work downwards. Now, this is a different method. It's not as quick, but you can do it in two ways. You can just keep working over. Now your paper is dry, it's less likely to cause you any trouble. So just keep repeating that exercise. Wash your brush off. Wash your brush off with each stroke. Wipe it slightly and go over your mark that you've made. Okay, same again. The less you go over your marks, the better, but obviously with this wet on dry method, it's going to take you a little bit more time. So again, start inside the cloud. I'm just going to do a half ray here, so it's something that finishes on the paper, not off the paper. Like that. And you can see the effect is coming really nicely. Let's have one coming down this way, I think, like this. So depending on where the sun is will depend on where your rays come in. So the sun is actually up here behind this cloud, so it's going to sort of cast rays all over the place. So just be aware of that. You can also just put a whole load of water down on your paper like that, and you can take a piece of clean paper towel and just press like this, and that will basically give you the same effect. Okay, so I think we'll have another one coming down this, like this, just slightly thicker, I think. Okay, right, I'm going to leave it at that. You could fiddle with this forever. I'm just going to quickly dry this off and then I can lift off the masking fluid. Okay, don't lift the masking fluid off until your paper is completely dry. I'm hoping that this is completely dry. Again, if you've got slightly larger areas of masking fluid, just be really careful when you come to lift off the masking fluid. Just small, gentle, be as gentle as possible, rotation marks with your finger. Okay, so there you have it. You've got two different methods. You can build up these clouds and play with them as much as you want. So this, just to refresh, this was wet on dry. So you put a wet in wet background down and you lift the rays off with a semi-dry brush while it's still wet. This one, I did one when it's semi-dry, and then I did these smaller ones when it's completely dry. So you've dried off your paper and you use a semi-dry brush to lift off those rays. The other way, so the third way, was to put a line of water down and then take your clean sheet of kitchen roll and then just lay the kitchen roll down on top. Okay, so I'm just going to take off the masking tape so you can see the finished article, and have a go. It's really quite a nice exercise to play with. It's best to, when you're doing these exercises, just to do small pieces. Oops, Now that's torn, you can see this is an old piece of masking tape. Okay, so do small samples first before you start embarking on larger pieces of work, and get the practice in. And you know, you can see that those two are really quite effective. The only thing I might change is the sort of harshness of what's going on here. And like I said, you just take, literally, just take a semi-dry brush and just go in and soften those edges up. Yeah? So have a go at that. I hope you enjoy it. And once you've done this one, have a look at how to create mist in watercolour. You can watch this back in your own time, and also keep leaving comments and liking and subscribing. Thanks everybody, and see you again soon.